Hello, my name is Rsyslog and I'm the main author of Rsyslog. This presentation actually is a test. I want to start some video presentations, and this is the initial one. In it I want to get you a quick glimpse of how data flows through the Rsyslog engine. Most importantly, we have three stages from a user's point of view. This is over here where the inputs reside. That is where you receive UDP messages, TCP messages, or gather file data. And the other thing you usually see is the outputs. These are those things that forward messages to another server, write messages to the database, to files, or send emails. So in essence, inputs and outputs is that what you usually see by $mod load statements inside rsyslog.conf. All this in between you don't usually see as a user. What you see is the parse and filter engine, where you do things like asterisk.asterisk write it to somewhere, or mail.info write it to some file. So now on to the data flow, maybe mostly of interest for folks that would like to see how the engine itself works, which is quite important if you have very complex use cases. So first of all, messages are gathered by inputs, and they run multiple inputs at the same time. Each input is run on at least one thread. It may spawn additional threads based on the input. This is an input module like IM-UDP or IM GSSIP or IM file. Each of the inputs uses part of what is the Rsyslog runtime at core. Each input passes the data to a preprocessor that does a tiny little bit to the message and then puts it into the main message queue. There currently is only a single main message queue. Later releases may have more than one. The queue decouples the inputs over here and the preprocessor from the rest of the Rsyslog system. Note that the preprocessor is executed in the input thread, and the other things have their own threads. The queue, as any Rsyslog queue, can be purely kept in memory, written to disk, or a combination of both, which is most important. The queue also, when messages come out of the queue, this is done by queue worker threads. So here at this point, at this side of the queue, we have more than one thread potentially, based on configuration and based on traffic volumes. The thread that dequeues an element runs it first through the parser to extract syslog message properties, and then puts it through the filter engine. Filter engine evaluates messages one rule after another, and if the rule matches, it is enqueued inside the action queue, which means an action should be carried out. For example, if you have a queue, if you have not a queue, if you have a filter set, a classical syslog filter, mail.info should go to var log mail info log. Then the filter engine looks at the syslog priority field, and if it is mail.info, then and only then it is put into an action. So in essence, what happens in the filter engine after the message has been passed is that the message is enqueued in another queue, and there is one queue conceptually per action. So if you have three filters with three actions, all of these actions have their own queue. It depends on our syslog configuration if the queues are actually queues or if the message is directly passed on to the action processor without any decoupling of the process. If the queue is run as a queue, further processing over here is asynchronous. So in essence, the message is duplicated when it is put into a queue and then passed to the processor. The essence of that is, if you have three actions that are executed one after another and you run them asynchronously, you actually have three different message objects at this stage. This is most important with the discard action. If you remember, discard the current message object. So if the first, let's say, if the first element inside Rsyslog conf for a given message is discard action, then the other filter, then the other actions will never see that. Except, of course, if you do it asynchronously. Then, because what then happens is the message is duplicated to enqueue it, and then it will be discarded over here. But the other messages run asynchronously through these other actions. So in essence, the one discarded will be the copy, but the original message will be run through the rest of the engine. Okay, that was one use case. Let's get back to the message flow in general. As I said, the worker threads parse the message and run filters on it, and for each filter that evaluates to true, the message is put into an action queue. Now let's assume that the action queue is indeed a queue, and so then it decouples again this process from the rest of the system. So these three, if all of them are actual queues, these three totally run in parallel. Again, we conceptually have the ability to run multiple worker threads over here and over here, but we don't do it at the moment because the outputs are defined to be non-reentrant. So Rsyslog ensures that no single output is called twice for the same action. So what now happens is the message is dequeued from the action queue, then it is run through an action processor, and that action processor finally sends it to the output. Now what's worth noting is if something goes wrong, the output may communicate back that something went wrong. For example, a DB output may not be able to connect to the DB because the DB server is down. In this case, it connects back to the action queue, to the action processor, and tells it that the action could not be carried out successfully. That in turn leads the action processor to tell the queue that the dequeue operation was not successfully, in which turn the queue takes the unprocessed element back. After some time, it has retried to process the element, the message, and let's assume that the database is still down. In that case, the output is asked to try to reconnect, then the output conveys back, no, I'm unable to reconnect, and that means the message will still be held in queue. After some interval, this is again retries. This time, let's assume the database server is back up, in which case the output returns to the action processor that it is able to connect to the database, which then leads to retrying the output of the message, and if that works, then the action processor actually tells the queue things have been finally processed and can be dequeued. So it is important to know that this can take some time. Let's say the database server is down for 10 minutes. If you don't have decoupled this part of the Rsyslog processing, what actually will happen is that the queue that dequeues it is this one. So in essence, if you have one output configured to be retrying and you have a single main queue, then all other actions, all other outputs will also be held unless or until the first action is able to complete its work. This is why it is important, if you have slow outputs and outputs you expect to be able to go offline, it is important to run these action queue concurrently, and you do this by specifying the several queue types. Okay, I'm at the end of my very first try of a presentation. I guess I went a bit wild through all the things. Maybe it's useful in any case, so I would really appreciate feedback. Thanks a lot.